each one of the panelists to have a quick presentation and maybe say a few words on some of these projects that highlight the cooperation between countries in the Global South in their area of work. Santiago, we thank you also again for joining us in a very already long night in the Americas, and you may now take the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me very well. And first, I would like to send the regrets of our director, Dr. Jarbas Barbosa, who wanted to be in this session, but sadly, given other prior commitments, he couldn't join. But given the importance of this topic and the opportunity to present to you our work at the Regional Revolving Fund as a South-South cooperation, he asked me to participate. Also, first, before I start, like the ambassador, I would like to highlight the importance of Women's Day and this critical topic that we want to address through the South-South Cooperation Access to Medicines. I'm here right now in Cartagena at the first forum for the elimination of cervical cancer. And we have a great opportunity at this moment. We have the tools, the diagnostic, the vaccines, and the treatment to eliminate this disease that particularly targets women and the women that need it the most, have most needs. So let me start very quickly to talk about the Regional Revolving Funds. That is a true South-South cooperation that was created by member states, by the countries, as a mechanism of technical cooperation to enable access to vaccines, essential medicines, and other public health supplies. It composes two funds, the Revolving Funds for vaccines and the Strategic Fund for other supplies. And basically, through pooled procurement and pooling the demand, it creates the economies of scales to benefit and create better conditions in terms of access. The goals of the funds are accessibility, meaning all countries, irrespective of size and income, to receive access to products. Affordability, as I mentioned, leveraging the economy of scale in order to negotiate better conditions. Availability, ensuring consistent and reliable supply, not just a one-off supply, but ensuring that supply chain will continue over time. And most important, quality. All products that are being procured through the Revolving Fund must ensure and comply with rigorous quality evaluation based on WHO recommendations. I would like also to highlight two important principles to achieve this goal. First, the principle of transparency. Given that our procurement is with public financing, we ensure that all bids are open and prices are public. The second one, the most important one in our fund, is solidarity, or as we refer in the Americas, Pan-Americanism. Member states, by participating in this fund, they benefit all other member states. And this is particularly important regarding the larger member states, where through their participation, it gives us that economy of scale and benefit particularly those member states that need it the most. So I will give you a spoiler of the key message about this South-South cooperation. It relies on countries like Brazil joining based on solidarity, because the benefit is mainly for others more than for themselves. So very quickly, what have we been able to achieve with these funds? At the moment, 42 member countries and territories joined, over 27 agencies, and we have benefited more than 180 million people. We have been able to reduce prices by 50% on vaccines compared with this outside in the market of middle income. And we have over 60 years of experience. Some of the key benefits of these revolving funds, as I mentioned before, one is a single point of access for member states, but also for manufacturers, which reduces transaction costs and allows the economy of scale. I mentioned the importance of quality assurance for medicines, and particularly important for vaccines. timely financing, and I will talk a little bit about the financing element, also part of the South-South cooperation and solidarity, and that we, as a funds, we support the process and our member state going through the process of planning and then accessing the support. Finally, it's a technical cooperation mechanism, and therefore we foster South-South event cooperation by bringing countries together to share their experiences and best practices. I talk about the solidarity and around the financing. The revolving fund charges a fee of 4.25% of the transaction of the cost of the goods that the countries procure. Out of this 4.25, 2.5% goes to what we a credit line, a capitalization of a credit line. This credit line it gives access to all countries that procure through the fund, and it gives them short-term liquidity at 0% interest. So member states do not need to prepay. Those that can't, but we are able to process their orders, and they can pay back after 60 days after they receive the supply. This is very important to ensure the timely access and the timely also to comply with timelines with manufacturers. Again, this is 0% interest and is constantly being refinanced by every member state that procures through the fund. And some of them are still contributing while never utilizing this fund, showing the solidarity. The remaining 1.75% that is being utilized to maintain the operations of the funds, and as well the technical cooperation that we provide to our member states. So in summary, I would like to highlight the importance of this solidarity, the importance of the contribution that particularly large states make. And as we discuss, there are many examples where we can talk about in terms of elements of contribution and bringing countries together. And this is what makes the strength of the revolving fund. We bring countries to share experiences, to bring new approaches towards demand planning, demand consolidation, and also we look at together how can strengthen the supply chain of the member states. Finally, very important, and the ambassador mentioned in terms of the context, the regional revolving fund also is an important tool that can be leveraged for regional manufacturing. As one of the critical successes or factors for regional manufacturing is the predictability of demand. If it's completely disaggregated, that predictability is difficult to obtain. One of the benefits that we have in our region through our regional revolving fund is that we can provide that predictability of demand. This is one of the areas, one of the priorities of our director to further strengthen the role of the revolving fund in regional manufacturing to ensure that resilience that is needed for us based on the lessons learned from COVID and the dependence that we have right now on external suppliers. So let me stop here in terms of a brief introduction about the revolving fund, but I will be very happy to answer any question. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Santiago. Muchas gracias. And wonderful introduction to the work of the Revolving Fund and of PAHO. I would like kindly ask Datuk Rosaida, if you may, to also share a little bit on the Ravisdavir project on hepatitis C in Malaysia that has been also quite an interesting example of countries in the South working together for providing access to medicines. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Victor. I would like to thank the Embassy of Brazil for inviting me to give a talk about Ravisdavir this morning. Can I pass?
Yes, sure.
Okay, this morning I will be giving a talk on the Ravisdavir, the latest hepatitis C treatment in Malaysia. Next. Okay, this is an outline of my presentation today. Next. Okay, in 2020, Muhammad et al. Have reported that 0.3% of adult population in Malaysia are living with hepatitis C, and with a seroprevalence of 0.2%. Next. Okay, this graph shows that we can see that 10% last 10 years, there's increasing trend of notifications due to the awareness of the disease and also the ability of the drugs, the DAA, currently in Malaysia. Next. So this is the Malaysia multi-pronged strategy. We have number one is the development of affordable DAAs. Number two is we issued a compulsory licensing. 3, introduction of standard treatment with DACLA and Sophos initially, but now we have Ravisdavir and Sophos. And 4, we quickly decentralize the treatment to the primary healthcare. Next. Okay, what is compulsory licensing? It allows a country to produce or use a generic versions of patented pharmaceutical product for public health needs. And with this, we can bring down the treatment cost less than $300 in Malaysia. Next. So with the compulsory licensing, we allow us to roll out the DAA recommended treatment, DACLA and Sophos initially to the public health sector. And before we're waiting for the clinical trial and registration of Ravisdavir. Next. Okay, this is the key milestone of HCV agenda in Malaysia. 2017, we break through the barrier when our government issued a compulsory license on Sophosvir so that we can bring in the DAAs. In 2019 until 2022, we set a tone for DAAs decentralized. We published our first national strategic planning on DAAs, and we make sure that the screening services using RDT and DAAs available in 471 primary healthcare centers. And in 2023 onward, we're going beyond the low-hanging fruit, where we go more towards those who injected drug or use drug, people who are living in correctional setting, especially the prison, those who are under National Anti-Drug Agency surveillance, and of course, we are going to treat the patient hepatitis C in end-stage renal failure patients. And of course, we endorse Sophos and Ravi as our first-line treatment for hepatitis C in Malaysia now. And in July 2023, Ravisdavir have been listed in the essential medical list by WHO. Next. So through source of collaboration, the NDI brought in the STOMC study in Malaysia and Thailand. Next. So this is the signing ceremony within CRM and the NDI with the aim to launch a highly affordable and yet effective novel DA combinations of Ravisdavir and Sophosvir. Next. Okay, this study contains 2 stages. Stage 1 and stage 2, using the Ravisdavir and Sophosvir. It is done in 6 sites in Malaysia and 4 sites in Thailand. We treat for those without cirrhosis, 12 weeks, and compensated cirrhosis, that means the child's A cirrhosis, 24 weeks. Next. So this is the result of the stage 1 study. Overall SPR12 for intention to treat was 97%. As you can see here, that is very high. The SPR12 in genotype 1 to genotype 3. And is comparable within the cirrhotic, non-cirrhotic patient, HIV and non-HIV patients, and those who have received treatment prior to that or naive patients. And this study has been published in the Lancet in April 2021. Next. So after completed the second stage, we can see that Ravisdavir and Sophos was well tolerated with excellent safety and efficacy, and is good in the difficult to treat population. We have we can see here the success rate is high, more than 96% for cirrhotic genotype 3 HIV co-infection and prior HCV treatment. Next. So the most common side effects is fever, URTI, cough, dizziness, and headache. Very few of them develop side effect related to or develop adverse events. The most common is nausea, dizziness, lethargic, and headache. Only one patient developed serious adverse event, and this patient admitted due to acute kidney injury, but it resolved spontaneously after a few days. And it was related to the supportive care. Okay, next. Okay, on 4th June 2021, our ex-DG, Tan Sri Hisham, has announced that Malaysia became the first country to grant conditional approval for Ravida, the treatment developed through South-South cooperation. Next. So this is the number of facilities offering the treatment DAAs from 2018 until 2022. We can see that it started in 2018 in 24 hospitals in April 2018. In 2019 onward, we start to decentralize to primary healthcare, to 27 primary healthcare. Following that, we expand further to primary healthcare and more to hospital. And by August 2023, the DA available in 474 primary healthcare and 68 hospitals. Next. So during the pre-DA era, from 2013 to 2017, we only managed to treat 1,200 patients. But during the DA era, from 2017 until now, we was able to manage to treat more than 20,000 of patients. Next. So this is the HCV treatment decentralization model in Malaysia. Screening will be done using the RDT in the primary healthcare, prison, rehab center, or CSO. And those who are positive, variable confirmation will be done using HCV-RA or core antigen, and it will be sent to the hospital. Once result back, cirrhotic status will be determined by using APRI of E4. Non-cirrhotic and compensated will be treated in primary healthcare. Only decompensated will be sent to the hospital. So treatment will be started using sulfasalazine or Ravi. And after completed treatment, SVR will be determined by sending the HCV-RA to the hospital. The HCV-RA not detected, that means the patient cured. If detected, that means the patient had failed treatment. So this patient should be sent to the hospital for second line using soft and valve. Next. So now currently we are having a study to look into the efficacy of shorter treatment, 8 versus 12 weeks with Sulfox and Ravi, and it should be come out. The result will be come out in next few months. Okay, next. Okay, our YBMK have announced that Malaysia is aspiring to become the hepatitis C treatment hub for Asia, with promises of treatment at a fraction of current cost. We are poised to offer affordable and efficacious treatment for those infected with the virus. Next. So this is the multi-pronged strategy of Malaysia to navigate hepatitis elimination agenda. First, we had a very affordable and accessible drug. We quickly decentralized the treatment to primary healthcare so that the patient can access the treatment. We have very good inter-operational partnership with the NDI, FINE, CSO, and also the correctional setting and etc. We have explored new options through R&D, and we have very strong political will and good central coordination to send the drugs and the kits throughout Malaysia. Okay, next. So in conclusion, pursuing hepatitis C elimination agenda in low middle income countries is possible. Malaysia's model could be a game changer for health equity worldwide.
Thank you so much, Datuk Rosaida, and a lot of actually on the details and on the actual, let's say, outcomes of seeing the number of people getting treated is fantastic. And also not only on the price of the drugs and accessibility, but actually on the final health outcomes. Wonderful. And now, Dr. Isabella, please.
I also have a few slides, but it's important that to come just after Dr. Rosaida, because in a way, the Dengue Alliance originates very much, and it's inspired by the work that was done through the Hepatitis C collaboration with Malaysia. So I present on behalf of the Alliance group. So the next slide, dengue is a disease that continues to increase, and the numbers, it increases and causes devastation globally. Brazil is experiencing a very important outbreak this time. So next slide. We see that actually with climate change, we experience this significant geographic expansion and this is now increasingly recognized as a problem, right? New geographies, and actually some of the reviews indicating that, for example, the African continent, that so far where the disease has not been very much described, is one to be mostly affected in terms of the new geographies for dengue. So next, as we engaged in dengue, it's interesting that there have been important advances over these recent years in vaccines and in vector control strategies. And the vaccines, the Takeda vaccine, that have been now results. There are the WHO stage recommendations. Brazil integrated the vaccine, and it's actually currently just starting implementation. Butantan vaccine announced results of phase 3 that are very encouraging, and phase 3 is continuing, phase 3 studies, and actually submission to regulatory authorities to come very soon. Vector control methods there are very actually innovative methods with the Wolbachia. Malaysia is one of the countries where it is currently implementing. Brazil also. It is actually something that has enormous opportunities, no doubt, but there is a complexity and investments for implementation and sustaining such implementation. And we are and actually one needs to recognize that's actually just starting to happen in most places. To date, there is no dengue specific treatments. Dengue is a disease that is managed largely with paracetamol and fluid management and risk stratification as a key tool. We don't, and in our process to understand the unmet needs in dengue, one thing that came clear was the fact that although progress is there with some tools, treatments are also needed, right? We don't need just one tool or another, but we need a portfolio of countermeasures. And that it's likely for the decade, this is actually to happen, and this needs to remain for the decades to come. Next. When we look at the treatment landscape, specifically in terms of the pipeline for dengue, it's quite empty. And so although there is no dengue-specific treatments, if one looks actually in phase 2 proof of concept, there is a single compound that is currently in phase 2, which is from Novartis. J&J is actually focusing on, that is the very interesting pan-serotypic molecule, but it's actually today being developed for prophylaxis with a focus on prophylaxis. So there is one monoclonal that is now showing also promise, but otherwise it's really early days, very early days. And when we look in research and development, this type of picture is one, particularly if one takes consideration attrition. It suggests that we need certainly much more to be reassured of the prospects. So this is certainly not an exhaustive list when we look at the discovery side. And one needs to also understand that this is all we're looking here is antivirals. It's really nothing in terms of host-directed therapies, which are considered part of the strategies for intervention in dengue specific treatment. Next slide. So we launched and together with partners this ambitious plan to accelerate innovation in dengue therapeutics to address and with a focus on unmet needs and neglected populations. And it's starting from building a community for research and development for dengue therapeutics and really aiming to deliver a new treatment solution within the next 5 years and with a focus on actually having a dengue treatment that would prevent progression to severe disease, and therefore with the prospects of decreasing the burden to health systems, which is actually one of the key problems in dengue interventions. Next. So we set up in collaboration with disease endemic countries. We co-created this Dengue Alliance with the partnership with Malaysia and also Fiocruz and the Federal University of Minas Gerais, Mahidol University City Large Hospital, and the Translational Health Science and Technology Institute of India. We set up, DNDi provides the secretariat for this, and we are partnering with the key institutions from each of these disease endemic countries. We have a joint steering committee with that currently I chair with Mark Krieger and my co-chair, but we alternate and rotate the chairing of this. Next slide. So we have different working groups. I promise I will not go through the slide, but it is just to indicate that we have a preclinical working group where we evaluate these molecules. We have a clinical working group where we design the trials. We have a translational one, and we have that is actually and a governance that is interinstitutional steering committee. Next slide. So just some summary here, as we have the idea of this alliance is the objectives. Is that bringing forward what's missing in the current dengue R&D ecosystem, really employing what is called this portfolio approach, the idea that no single tool will be necessary, that we will start with repurposing agents, bringing in novel agents, apply the learnings for COVID response, where we have this slow, fragmented approach with that there is a need for resource-limited settings and from disease endemic countries' perspective. And really building a different model architecture where we would actually have the leadership from the endemic countries, the South-South partnerships, and that with this coordinated way to address the gaps. So really, that alliance here created jointly to really build this different innovative model for research and development with a focus on neglected patients and the public health approach.
Thanks for all the speakers, and it seems quite interesting that we saw, let's say, a road from procurement, actually acquisition of medicines, and something that has been long established, such as the PAHO Revolving Fund for decades now, to South-South cooperation on clinical trials and a project that is already recent but having results, and the South-South cooperation R&D and on debate on the science and on getting new tools for patients and for people. So going from the, let's say, technological framework of it, also from history, and seeing different models and different scenarios. I'll go a bit first before opening up to a few questions. But just, I think one of the million-dollar question on the Revolving Fund, it's been, there's a lot of knowledge about it, a lot of discussion, and but what we hear in other scenarios, and what I'd like to ask for Santiago is, do you foresee that this model is replicable in other regions? So, for example, the region of Southeast Asia has very similar characteristics to Latin America, even though the Revolving Fund involves all of the Americas, it's mostly used by countries in Latin America. But very similar scenario, large countries such as Brazil, Mexico, Argentina, but also small countries that could contribute, as you mentioned, from this joint procurement. So my question is, do you think this will be replicable in other institutions, Asia, the other WHO regional offices? And has that been tried? How do you see this model could be a reference for other regions? Thank you.
Thank you. This is a great question, and it's a question that actually we have been getting more and more because in the current context there are more regions interested in this model. In fact, I think it was 2 weeks ago the Africa CDC announced that they will create a pool procurement mechanism for Africa. So definitely there is interest and there is a need. Now, perhaps I will start by understanding the context. The Revolving Fund for Vaccines was created in 1979. When it started, it was a very, very different environment. So very few vaccines, less than 7 vaccines were procured, less than 5 actually were procured, very small amount by 7 countries. Now it's a very different context, very different interests, very different levels of investment. So that will make it more difficult. On the other hand, as I mentioned before, given the realization of the need for diversification of manufacturing, of regional approaches and resilience, these models have now a different political commitment than perhaps before. So there is some opportunities. I cannot judge if Asia and WHO could do it or not do it. Let me perhaps focus on what is needed for a revolving fund to be successful. And the most important is the institutional capacities. Just to briefly mention, the Pan American Health Organization is the oldest health organization in the world. In fact, was created before WHO over 120 years ago. So as such, we are a little bit different in terms of the WHO structure because we have our own financial, legal capacities. So one of the critical elements that or functions that the institution needs to have is the financial systems in order to provide safeguards, independence, check and balances, legal capacities to do this work. Just to highlight a little bit, during the COVID pandemic, the Revolving Fund procured over $1.4 billion annual in terms of products. So the level of capacity that you need to have from a financial and legal perspective is very important. Our normal procurement between the two funds is just $1 billion. On vaccines alone, over $700 million. So this is important. And as you said, we provide access for all countries in the Americas, except the United States and Canada, but it ranges from very large countries like Brazil and Mexico to very small Caribbean islands where they procure only a few doses. The third capacity besides the financial and legal that is important is the quality assurance. While we rely on WHO pre-qualification, still that's not enough. So we do have to do quite a lot of work working with our national regulatory agencies in our region in reviewing the submissions of the manufacturers that bid in order to ensure that meets those requirements that will be applicable in our region. So it's very important to have that capacity in terms of quality assurance because it's fundamental for the success of the funds from the member states and the trust in this mechanism. And now from the trust on the manufacturer is your capacity to support demand planning, because the accuracy of your demand will basically give you the credibility with the manufacturers that will allow us to get better conditions. So how you will work with your member state to ensure that accuracy of demand. Again, all of these capacities can be obtained, but if they are not there, it will take some time to achieve them, and it will be a path that will need to be developed in order to strengthen all of these capacities that will be fundamental in order to establish a fund like the Revolving Fund. Just to mention, the Africa CDC is an experience that is not while it was launched, it will take quite some time, and there's a plan behind in terms of when it will be fully operational. But the most important element that is required is political will and solidarity. Also, my other two panelists show in their examples the political will, which is fundamental. And the political will particularly, it needs to be shown by those member states that will benefit the least. As I said, in our case, Brazil is a great example of that solidarity, because it's by Brazil joining that most of the time we don't get worse conditions that Brazil will get alone, but it's not a big difference, or it's the same. But by countries like Brazil joining, it benefits a country like St. Lucia or Antigua and Barbuda, that if we wouldn't have it, we will not obtain. So is the political will, and particularly the solidarity of those large countries with more purchasing power joining and participating, that will make this mechanism successful.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much, Santiago. And interesting to see all the development of it and how it comes from quite a small groups of countries and group of vaccines, and a natural way of going forward. And actually, I believe countries learning to work together and gaining more experience and more trust in the system. If I can move on a little bit, Rosaida, you mentioned the clinical trials and the inclusion in the WHO essential medicines list. And I was interested a bit on the regulatory requirements and the process of inclusion in the essential medicines list. Having clinical trials in Malaysia, Thailand, project from Egypt, did you face any obstacles that were related to the particular scenario of the Ravisdavir Sofosbuvir combination? Thank you.
And we know before we started the study, we know that Ravidavir is very potential drugs for the treatment for hepatitis C. So from the beginning, we know that if it's a successful study, it will be registered as one of the hepatitis C treatment. So Malaysia is very committed, all the 6 sites. We make sure that documentation is good and complete. And of course, we make sure that the protocol is adhered strictly. So once completed the study, we know that MPRA will do an inspection to us, and we don't know which centers. But at last, they decided to inspect 2 out of the 6 centers, Selayang and also Ampang. Ampang mainly is under principal investigator that time, mainly because we are the highest recruiter, more than 100 patients. So of course, the stress going through the inspection for 1 week, they can't find any major issues for 2 sites, only very minor issues we can overcome. And we were able to successful to register it in Malaysia. Of course, because our DG also at that time is our Tan Sri Hisham, is very supportive in this study, bring in the study, Stoxy, and he also wants Ravidavir to be registered as the first country in Malaysia from the world, and to show CAS that what we have done. So because of that, I think after we have partially registered, and following that, we fully registered after the Stoxy. WHO already registered last year based on our STOMSRI study because of the success rate of the equivalence with other hepatitis drugs. So
Thank you. That's it's good to know also that the WHO was quick to act actually when seeing the relevance of the data. And just one quick question also. Datuk Rosaida mentioned the importance of the political leadership of Malaysia for the Ravisdavir project. And Dr. Isabella, how do you see the importance of the political leadership of the countries who are in the Dengue Alliance, the coming steps that the project will have? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I think it's an essential component. I think that as we saw through the example from the two examples given already, the cases that you present, I think there is this element here when we look into the case of Ravisdavir, the time that it took, right? Research and development is not something that as you will engage, right? That where you have firstly an immediate assurance of success, right? That is, we have targets, we aim, we plan, right? But there is a need for sustained commitment, and particularly as we have and with one institute, right? This collaborative approach with the different countries, and with this medium term view, I think that the political will of this endemic country institution, it's very important, and actually the engagement, right, at Ministry of Health, and we see this as actually a fundamental point, and so we are just starting, right, but we see with the events that we had this week here in Malaysia, with the presence of the Ministry of Health and the ambassador and others, in terms of actually raising and putting forth the visibility, dengue visibility, and this element of actually trying to articulate, right, that the job is not done in dengue, right? The fact that we have some tools, but we will need to learn how to use them in an integrated way. But we will need also treatments, and we should think no less in the case of dengue than we had in COVID as an example. Right? So thank you for the question. I do think this is as an important way forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Dr. Isabella. And yes, it was quite interesting also to see the backing of the project and all the events that we saw this week on Dengue Research Visibility Day, and obviously the meetings themselves. So I'll open up to the audience and see if anyone has any questions. Okay, raise your hands. Yes, I see someone there.
Yeah, thank you. My question is to Santiago. This is regarding the Revolving Fund. For the pool procurement for vaccines, is that only for Gavi eligible countries, or if a non-Gavi eligible country is interested, how the price quote comes? Are they eligible to approach to Gavi price or not? So this will be helpful for other countries to think when other regions, when they go for pool procurement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Great question. Our revolving fund is not linked to Gavi eligibility. In fact, we were created 30 years before Gavi was created. So we have been working many decades before. Now, in terms of pricing, part of the solidarity and part of this equity in terms of access, we offer the same price to all member states. We don't differentiate in terms of pricing within the member states that access. So a very small country, again, like St. Lucia, will pay the same price as a Brazil or an Argentina. So that is part of our negotiation with manufacturers. So when we negotiate with manufacturer, we only request a single price and the lowest price possible. We have made exceptions for Gavi prices that are for low income. And in those cases, we do have a few Gavi eligible countries. Then for those countries, we access the Gavi price, and they will get that price. But for the great majority, as I said, we procure for 41 member states and territory. We have all the Caribbean islands and territories, most countries in all countries in Central America, and all countries in South America procure from one vaccine to all vaccines. That's another important element of the revolving fund. A country to participate, they don't need to procure all vaccines or nothing. We have countries that only come for a few products where they either don't have local manufacturing or they see the benefit of joining this mechanism to get better conditions. So it's up to the countries to join in terms of what products they would like to procure, as we offer all of the vaccines currently in the market that are recommended by WHO. I hope I was clear in answering the question. If not, I will be happy to clarify.
Thank you. This actually is for the whole panel. I think the issue of drug safety and efficacy is obviously crucial. And I was very interested in Santiago's comment that for the region, the WHO PQ is not enough, and you need to work with obviously all the national regulatory authorities. And I saw Dr. Rosaida in the Malaysian case, because it was the first time it was to be registered. So we were starting from scratch. And I know DNDI brought in a lot of technical support. So often we find that countries in the South look to stringent regulatory authorities. We aspire to be SRAs. But really, I mean, sometimes we do know that a lot of the standards in the SRAs and in the OECD are very influenced by big pharmaceutical industry. So without compromising on safety and efficacy, this kind of South-South cooperation, and what I hear, and I'd like to hear more from the panel, that we can actually ensure safety and efficacy quality, but we actually can also look at standard setting that really works for us and that actually meets the objection of diversification of manufacturing and access. Thank you.
About to start.
Yeah, because in the case of the Ravisdavir, maybe you were going to say that, but in the case of the Ravisdavir, there was a deliberate choice not to go for stringent regulatory authority registration, because in the South collaboration, we work with Thailand, Malaysia, and Egypt, and all these three regulatory authorities are very good regulatory authority. And so in the NDI, we felt that this was a guarantee enough of the quality of the Ravisdavir, and we need to go for WHO qualification or stringent regulatory authority registration, because it's very, very expensive and could be considered as a barrier to access sometimes.
Yes, I was commenting, I was going to start by indicating, firstly, we try now to avoid, right, the use of stringent regulatory authorities. And actually the WHO currently now indicates that we should be shifting, right, from stringent regulatory authorities to WHO listed authorities, right? And that WHO list of authorized authorities. And where there is this clear benchmarking tool, right, that has been developed, where you do have defined, one has defined and established maturity level for the different regulatory authorities. And so as indicated by Jean-Michel, it was a strategic decision to actually have the country of first registration being in Malaysia. And as the development was done, the risk benefit assessment was done within the country. But this doesn't mean at all, right, that we're talking about different, one is accepting lower standards. No, it is about actually international standards, best practices, and actually having processes in place to ensure that. And so I do think there is, as one thinks ahead, right, and is particularly is how the global procurement agencies and mechanisms, right, will address this gradual shift, right, and as one and the progress in terms of increasing maturity and the existing benchmarking in terms of WHO listed. And so it is, I think we have an evolving landscape. One has to acknowledge that, and that as one, but it is an important moment, and I think it's certainly, as indicated, one that is important component as one thinks of innovation and access for the countries. Thank you, Dr. Rosaida. Sorry if I spoke a bit too much.
Okay, I think CDG knows that our Malaysia is one of the most very strict NPRA. So basically that's why I think our DG wants to be registered in Malaysia. From the beginning, I think the paperwork was done very well. From before shipping the Ravidasvir into Malaysia and until the end of the study. So everything we have already make sure that everything tip top. So it's not easy to go through that again. You know, even like DG cannot actually try to persuade our NPRA. No way, despite he's a DG. So I think that's the best way that that's why I think with the registration, partial registration, and then after that fully registration, WHO accepted us because our NPRA is very, very strict and very efficient.
Yes, no, thank you. This is a critical question and an important area. We started with pre-qualification as the critical component as the one, and it's again, this is a historical movement. Then we move what was called the stringent regulatory agencies, and we have agencies of reference that we accept when there is no procure. This is important. For example, we procure influenza vaccine from our regional manufacturers that some of them are pre-filled syringes that are not pre-qualified, but because they are from one of our list of reference agencies that have met those standards, then we can procure. This is why it's important, because then when countries procure through us, this product doesn't need to be evaluated by each individual agency again. They rely on our review. That's a great benefit for the manufacturer to basically come to the funds. That, you know, instead of having to go through 30 or 40 different assessments, they only need to go to one through our bid process. What I mentioned, and this is an evolving, as it was, it's an evolving field. WHO is changing its criteria and is going to change what will be required to be part of this list. And I would think that in the short term, it might mean that some countries, not Malaysia, but perhaps others, will be more difficult to reach that status. But also, it's important, particularly around vaccines, given that they are biologicals, they're very different products to make in terms of technology, in terms of complexity, and also we are vaccinating, stay healthy, most of the time, children. So really the quality is something that it cannot be jeopardized in terms. And when I was talking about also about the conditions or the capacities that it needs to happen, it's not just for reviewing the components, the information from a bid, but always, for example, on vaccines, there are excursions of temperature in transportation. So you need to review, has this jeopardized the product? It hasn't. Does it still is effective? So there are many elements in the operations when you send vaccines and other medicines that requires follow-up and requires to have that expertise in order to be able to answer to those governments that they are paying from their own national resources for those vaccines or medicines.
So I have a question for Santiago, which is a very practical one, because we are actually currently discussing with the Malaysian and the Thai Ministry of Health for, you might have heard about it, Santiago, for the secure mechanism, which is a procurement mechanism for antibiotics, which is led by DNDI sister organization called CARPI. And one of the challenges we have is Malaysia and Thailand, of course, are keen and able to drive such an agenda. But in the case of joint procurement, if you do open tender, Malaysia, which has an industry but serving 35 million people, will find it very hard to compete against the industry, for example, from Indonesia, which serves 200 million people, or even India or China. So there is a real problem, because you could actually end up killing the local industry with this kind of joint procurement mechanism. Is it something you have experienced in Latin America? And is there any lesson learned from that?
That is an excellent question, a very difficult question, because one that perhaps there is no single answer, and it will have multiple scenarios. This is what I was mentioning, that most countries that, in our case, the members of the revolving fund, there is, when countries produce, they don't tend to procure through us because they use the local production. Now, the benefit of joining is that it gives them access to a wider market that then it will be very difficult to access. That's the benefit in terms. So I would say that it's going to be the only way that we have been able to manage this is by the diversification, by the economy of scale. I would say in a scenario where you have two countries both manufacturing, it would be very difficult to find this win-win, for the industry, for the member states, because there will be differences. We are now tackling the issue if we want to foster and incentivize more local manufacturers in our region, what it will mean in terms of pricing, because the reality is that in the short term, they will not be able to compete with some giants in Asia, like you mentioned, in India. Now China is coming with a lot of products in vaccines. So how would we be able to compete, and what do we need to do to support our regional producers to be able to compete? Because at the end of the day, what we need is sustainable manufacturing, one that is competitive in the market.
I thought to make one additional comment in relation to this point, right? I think one example of where both procurements are of particular relevance, right, is on the question and the issue of low volume products, right? Because we've talked, okay, when we give the example of dengue, probably will not be in a situation potentially of low volume products, but there are a number of products when we talk about neglected diseases, right, where this is an issue. And when you talk even in HIV where you, for example, you have your second line treatment regimens, where you are in your pediatric treatments more broadly, right? Where when countries have the capacity to pull, it's actually felt to be one of the ways to address. So a lot of discussion today, right, on how to address the issues of low volume products broadly. And certainly the example of the Pharma Strategic Fund, it's a very interesting one. I really wanted to mention this because I think it's a question and an issue very dear to the NDI we've been discussing with them. Thank you.
Thank you. If I may add just 1 second, thank you for adding that, because actually we are now starting an initiative on the request of our member states to address the issue of rare diseases, where you have a volume per country of 2, 3 cases only. That is very difficult, not just on terms of pricing, but to receive reliable, timely supply. So this is where procurement can really make a big difference. We tend to focus a lot on vaccines, and because of perhaps the pandemic, where we all suffer the vaccine shortages, but there are many other opportunities in terms of regional manufacturing, diagnostics, for example, where there is a great opportunity or to pull demand and actually to make a difference. Thank you.
Santiago. So thank you once again for all the panelists. And I think the regulatory aspects is interesting because it's quite a discussion on the autonomy of it. As we mentioned, all countries also not only having local production, have regulatory capacities as part of the biosecurity. So it's always sometimes that to cooperate but guarantee that the national autonomy is there is an interesting discussion, an interesting balance that needs to be reached. But we saw that in all of the cases here, there has been a conclusion in that sense. So thank you very much to all the speakers for this grateful and very insightful panel. And please give them a round of applause. Thank you all once again.
Sorry, thank you very much. I apologize. I might leave the meeting, but thank you for the invitation. We, as PAHO and the Revolving Fund, will be very happy to contribute in any way that we can to advance these conversations if needed. Again, thank you for inviting us.
Oh no, it was wonderful. Gracias nuevamente, Santiago. And